as you can see from the title screen, this is going to be all about how we set up our KSK for our raids. It is Konfer SK is the add-on name. It's for managing Suicide Kings, and it allows you to set up your actual program with some variant loot rules. So as you saw there, I just typed in /KSK. That's your command to open the actual program. You're going to see a box just like I see, 5 tabs at the bottom, a couple tabs at the top, lists, loot, users, sync, and config tabs at the bottom. Each bottom tab has a couple of sub-tabs at the top. Yeah, I know it's backwards compared to Windows, but whatever. It is what it is. We're just going to go through real quick and show you where we want things configured, how to configure them, and why we kind of sort of do it. Just kind of try and follow along, and if you have questions, don't ask me because I don't care to answer them. Watch the movie again if you've got questions. Do what I do. Okay, first things first, we need to create a new config file. So you're going to do /KSK create config, just like you see there, and then you're going to type in the name that you want to create. In this case, we created a new config called new config. It's really hard to figure out. So on the config tab at the top, you're going to hit create, and this is going to create a new rolling list for your raid team. Where we called the config file new config, you'd call it O team, W team, G team, whatever. For the role list, you'd call it whatever you want to call it your role list, but probably O team, W team, G team again is highly recommended because there's not going to be a whole lot of overlap between people on multiple teams. It shouldn't really matter what you do as far as your config name and your team name. Just try and make sure that you've got some control over it and it can be separated from the other ones. We use strict class armor filtering, mostly because of the debuff that exists now in all of the different classes of armor. For example, if a warrior were now to equip rogue leather bracers, he would suffer a 5% damage decrease penalty for not using plate. We don't want that to happen. So, first things first, we need to create some users for your list. Now, there's 2 ways to do it. You can import from the guild, which will just massively screw everything up and put a ton of names on there you don't really need to worry about. For the 10-man teams we're running now, it's easier to create them one at a time. So as you can see there, I clicked on create, and I created one for Djibouti, put him down as melee, DPS, put him in as a pally, Brambles, GOW is the next one I'm putting in there, priest, and then I'm putting him down as a spellcaster, not a ranged DPS. Ranged DPS would be a hunter. So don't make that mistake. And while we don't use role filtering at all, I still like to have it in there because it makes it a little bit easier to track. So now I'm creating one for Ares, Druid Healer. He's also an enchanter. We'll show you that in a little bit. Soul Taken is a tank. DK, you can select tank from the role, piece of cake, no problem. And then we're going to create another melee DPS, I think. We'll throw Spug in there because I know he likes having his name mentioned. And we'll put him in as just melee DPS, just like we did with Djibouti. It's a piece of cake. You can pick the role, name, class. If they've got funny characters in their names, you can see that grayed out add missing button at the bottom center there. You use that once they're actually in the raid, and you can import them that way. What I'm doing here is I'm inserting the users into the list randomly, and as you can see, it just puts Bug above me. Doesn't really play any type of favorites. It's completely RNG based, so you don't have to worry about somebody taking preference over anybody else. As long as that insert randomly box is checked, you're good to go. Like I said before, we use the role filtering, but we don't use, we use the armor filtering, but we don't use the role filtering at all. The history and item editor things you don't really need to worry about at all. History will look like this once you've actually started clearing some bosses, and it'll keep track of who bid when on what items, and then if it didn't go to bid, if it went to roll. So obviously you've just created a config, so you're not going to have anything on that list currently. In here, under the users tab at the bottom, you're going to go in and you're going to select who your enchanters are. Like Ares is an enchanter, so we want to make sure that we update that. If you ever have somebody who you're going to bring in an alt to tank or heal, you would tie in their main character using that user as an alt hub box, and then you would select it. You just have to have both characters created as users for your config. It's not a big deal. Here are the settings that we're going to use as a guild. We want to spam the purples out to guild chat so everybody can see how awesome we are as we're downing bosses. You're going to use the default role list is always going to be whatever your config role list is. No guild rank filtering because we don't play that game. We're going to hide absent members so that they don't take up space. You're going to assign your enchanter. Anything that goes to BOE that isn't suicided on is immediately going to go to the master looter. Open roll if nobody bothers suiciding on a product, and set your threshold to purple and DE anything below that. Here's the main config here, alt tethered domains. We're going to use a guild config type, and then you can add co-admins to the guild list, or to the roster, and those are people who are going to share the ability to set up and change things on your add-on as far as your guild list, your people, being able to sync it, being able to change specific things if they want to. But it's not a huge deal once you get it all established. I would say co-raid leaders should each have it. If you've got a third person that will never ever miss a raid, you can have the option to give it to them as well. What you see me doing here is I was just going through and checking all of the wonderful information that we may need to see in the future. Just quickly going through, how to mass add people, add missing, how to delete the configs that you're deleting. Right there I just did /KSK space delete config and then the config name, and it wipes it out. So now you see that the only one remaining in my box is the G team list, which I'm not deleting because it's currently up and running and downing bosses, so we're gonna leave that alone. Again, like I said, if there's questions, you can ask somebody other than me because I don't care to answer them. Just try and make your boxes match my boxes in this video, and you should be okay. The big specifics that you're going to want to keep track of is make sure that you don't guild import, because you'll get every player in the guild. Make sure that you are keeping track of everybody who's coming into the raid by hitting the add missing button before the raid starts, and then that broadcast button right there, that's the button you hit before the start of every raid so people know where they stand on the loot list. That is about it. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon and try and kill some goddamn bosses, will ya?